This is round 9, played April 8th, 1960. Carlos Bielicki of Argentina is the player, and Carlos was born May 15th, 1940. He's still alive, a chess master from Argentina. He won the Junior Chess Championship of Argentina in 1958. He won the World Junior Chess Championship in 1959. That was at Münchenstein. And his win there earned him the International Master title. Of course, Bobby with e4 here. And we get c5, the Sicilian defense. Now knight f3, d6, d4, and pawn takes pawn. This is going to be an open Sicilian. Knight takes pawn. Now after knight f6, we have knight c3, and we get Miguel Najdorf's variation with pawn a6. And of course, we all know bishop c4 is coming. Lipnitsky's attack when played against Najdorf's. But after we transpose to a Shevenigan, it becomes a Sozin's attack by transposition. Bishop b3, knight c6. Here Bobby leaves the openings book with pawn f4. Usually we play bishop e3 first. Bishop e3 is the main line, and there are two lines that can be played after this. On queen c7, we can play the f4 that I just showed, which is answered by bishop e7, and then queen f3, and then black castles. Or, coming back, after queen c7, you can play queen e2, and then on knight a5, you get pawn g4 here. This is an interesting line, and after b5, g5, and knight d7. Bobby opting to play pawn f4 right straight away here. And Bielicki plays knight a5 anyway, and Bobby f5. Now that's marked inaccurate by the bot, but it is the most commonly played move among the masters. After knight takes bishop, we capture toward the center, especially when it opens a line for our rook, so we get to develop without making a move. Bishop e7 and queen f3, black castles, and now bishop e3. That is also marked inaccurate by the chess.com analysis bot. However, it is the most commonly played move among the masters. Bishop d7, marked as a mistake. The most commonly played move here is knight d7, which is also marked as a mistake. The bot calling for e5. The bot likes e5 and forces knight back to e2. Well, bishop d7 is what was played by Carlos. Now pawn g4. Now pawn e5 is played, and now it's marked inaccurate, which is a little bit ironic. So d5 being called for with the idea of knight e4. We get this attack here. So in other words, if I play e5, the knight comes to e4 and gets an exclam. So thank you very much for that. Of course, on knight takes the knight, pawn takes the knight, you're more than welcome to take this pawn, but that would be ill-advised if the bishop gets on this diagonal. Right now it's covered, so you probably can get away with it. But your king's out in the open. This is coming here. The bot actually preferred queen f4 on that previous move. And the thing is, you've got to be very careful if this is ever played. You're losing the exchange. Coming back, Carlos Bielicki with the pawn to e5, hitting the knight. The knight retreats to e2, now d5, gets a star. Here I wanted bishop c6 as well. Let's see what I get. I get a star. And again, the idea is I'm super attacking this pawn. That tethers the knight to the pawn. And I have this idea of perhaps someday opening the long diagonal and getting a nice attack. d5 by Carlos. Bobby plays pawn takes the pawn. Do not take that with the knight. When we take with the knight, then that allows knight takes knight, and on pawn takes knight, the queen can come to c7, although that seems to still favor white according to the eval bar. Pawn takes pawn was Bobby's choice. Now e4. Marked inaccurate. Bishop b4. bishop b4 is suggested, and that's going to be followed up by a5. Instead, e4 was played, and queen to g2, and this pawn is going to be pushed forward to g5. That would be winning. Don't try to get cute with knight takes e4 here. That's marked as a mistake, because after knight takes knight, well, we're probably okay, actually, if we queenside castle here. But what if he knight takes d5? That's marked as a mistake. Yeah, because I could still queenside castle, can't I? Well, he's got knight takes bishop, queen takes knight, queen c7. The eval bar still favoring white in this line. Probably best was knight takes knight here. And the eval bar's closer to center on this line. Anyway, queen g2 is better with the threat of g5. Bishop b4, pinning the knight. Queenside castles breaks the pin. a5 connecting. g5 as mentioned, but here it's marked as a mistake. And I actually liked rook d4 here. And I get a check mark for this move. I guess bishop c5 and have to give up the exchange, don't I? Because this is undefended. Right. So I'd have to play rook hd1 and let him have that. Ooh, I get a brilliancy. I get a brilliancy for giving up the exchange. I like that. I'll take that. After takes, we're going to take with our rook. You could probably take with the knight as well. So first brilliancy, I wasn't expecting a brilliancy there. It seemed pretty normal that I can't move my rook anymore because the bishop is undefended. Well, g5 was played, hitting the knight, and knight to e8, pawn f6. Do not play queen takes e4 here either, by the way. That's marked as a mistake, and probably still don't want to take with the knight here either. Thing is, on queen takes, you've got knight d6. Oof. So queen f3, and then this pawn gets captured. It's under super attack, defended by the bishop now. So coming back, if you take with the knight, if you take this pawn with the knight, bishop takes the pawn here anyway. And then you've got to defend here. And then the bishop can retreat here and put a lot of pressure on the c2 square. Rook's coming over. Maybe you're going to get a battery here. This does not look too good for white. Although the eval bar says it's still slightly better for white. Definitely not as comfortable. So Bobby with f6 gets the star. And here a4 is played, looking to pry open the a file, but right, knight d6 is needed to vacate e8 for the rook. That rook can't move, it's paralyzed. If I can get rid of his bishop, my bishop will hit that rook. So knight d6 being called for by the bot to vacate e8 for the rook. Well, a4 was played here, and knight a2 hitting the bishop. It's saying queen takes e4 now. So now I play queen takes e4. Couldn't play it before, but now I can because he moved his pawn, and that bishop is now undefended. So he'd have to take, and don't forget, this is looming now. So if he dares to take this pawn, boom. Now there's another interesting move here as well, besides queen takes pawn. Wonder what the bot would say to pawn takes g7 up here. Pry open the king. Now it says that's inaccurate. It was a thought. I get an exclam there. By the way, you don't want to lead with b takes a4 here. I think knight d6, and he's golden. Although the eval bar liking white no matter what we put up there. So anyway, a4, knight a2, even knight a2. So bishop d6, pawn b4. By the way, after bishop d6, this pawn is off the table again. You don't want to take it here. Because on takes, oops, you'd have to move your knight back to c3, and then you're losing this pawn, and he's put a pawn in his pocket, hasn't he? And if he interlocks these up here on the king's side, he's golden. And here, finally, the eval bar favors black in this line. So b4. What about pawn takes pawn? That should be playable. And after rook takes, then the knight a to c3. Nope, it's marked inaccurate. Although we all know what we think of the inaccuracy markings by Ficklebot, and we don't take them very seriously. Note the eval bar again favoring white in this position, so we don't sweat the yellows at all. The oranges, maybe. The reds, definitely, but not the yellows. Anyway, b4 from Bobby Fischer and queen c7. Bot calling for h5 here. That's curious. That's something only a bot would play. If I'm on the dark side of this, I want to play play a3 and try to pry open the white king. It gets a thumbs up. Queen c7 is the move chosen by Carlos Bielicki. Now king b1. I gave it a star. I'm thinking I probably can take the pawn again now, though, because that avails us of rook d3. Take this pawn, and that undefends this square. I get a star. And if he plays a3, I'll just play b3 and lock everything up. I get an exclam for that. Come back. So that is up for grabs again. Here, rook c8. Excuse me, did I not do something? I skipped. I didn't go back to king b1. Here, rook c8, battery attacking the c-man. Bot calling for g6. g6 is going to be answered by rook hf1, I think. Star. And then if rook c8 here, then we'll defend with our rook. So rook c8 right away from Bielicki, knight ec3. And now we're ready to pry open the king's position. Black played a3, Bobby with b3. You could probably take this. This is probably fine here. Let's see. We get a thumbs up. White stays just as clearly on top either way. If he plays bishop f5 here, I'll play bishop d4, getting behind here. Or maybe bring my rook over like in the other line. That also gets a thumbs up. He'd have to defend. Coming back, b3 from Bobby Fischer. Now bishop e5, and that's marked inaccurate. g6 is the best hope, I guess. That's unfortunate, isn't it? Bishop e5. Now knight takes the e-man, and that hopes for bishop c5 right here. It's marked as a mistake. d6. D6 is an interesting move. I should have thought of this. The idea of d6 is to vacate d5 for the knight. Quite a strong move, isn't it? Hits the queen, hits the e7 square. That's a fork against the king and the rook. So that's a fickle bot once in a while comes up with some nice moves. That is a nice one. It's very forcing because it hits the queen, doesn't it? So if you take with your knight, thank you very much. Now you got to move your queen to safety, and I'm winning the exchange. And I may not take it right away because I've got other attacking moves like rook d5, for example, hitting the bishop here. So, interesting position. Bobby played knight takes the pawn, and it's a reasonable move. He wants to play the bishop to c5, doesn't he? Well, bishop to f5 here. Note that if you play bishop h3 first, hitting the queen, it's marked inaccurate. I thought that'd be interesting. Note that you can't take it. The whole idea that I'm bringing out, I think I pointed this out earlier, but just in case I didn't, black is threatening checkmate in 2 moves. So if you take this, you've self-mated, haven't you? Oh, it's checkmate in 1. The bishop already controls h1. I forgot the bishop was covering. So that's the idea. But queen f2 is, oops, that was a mouse slip. I hate mouse slips. Queen f2 is the answer. And then this bishop has to come back here anyway. Hit that knight, and then the knight can go back to c3. Okay, coming back. Bishop f5 was played, and now pawn takes the pawn on g7. King takes g7, marked inaccurate. Bishop takes g7 being called for. Yeah, bishop takes g7 makes sense. It vacates the e5 square for the queen, and again, you have a checkmate threat, don't you? So these moves where a square gets vacated are quite subtle. It's the second one we've seen tonight, isn't it? Well, king takes g7 was played by Carlos, and now bishop c5 hits the rook. Knight d6, interposing, and that's marked inaccurate, but I thought it was as good a try as any, since black just doesn't have any good moves. I mean, the bot calling for b6 here, that's interesting. I guess the bot is saying this battery against c2 is more important than the material count here. If black has any attacking chances, it's on the c file. But you got to get rid of this defender in order to make that a reality. Right, well, knight d6 was played, knight takes knight, then bishop takes the knight. Now queen f2 here. Pawn b6 is now played. By the way, if he plays bishop takes, that's going to be answered by queen takes this bishop on f5. And then he can retreat his bishop to safety, but then we can secure all these pawns with one little move. And you can see the eval bar strongly favoring white there. Well, b6 was tried. Bishop d4 check. Don't play queen takes the bishop here. Queen takes bishop here, although again the eval bar still says we're clearly winning, but it's not as decisive. After pawn takes the bishop, well, I think I'll rook d3 here, lift the rook and get it into play. But you do have to be careful once again about the checkmate threat. And this is a mate in 2 threat now because the bishop's no longer on e5. But I can move the rook out of the way and discover a defense. So rook h3 looks interesting here, piling up on the h man is quite strong, and we're still defending the c2 pawn. He has to play here or it's a selfmate. He can trade queens, give up a queen and a rook for a queen and a pawn. But you see what I'm saying? Anything that doesn't prevent queen takes h7 is just losing to queen takes h7. Coming back, bishop d4 check is the move chosen from Fischer. King g6. Rook c1. Why didn't the bishop take what? Where? Here? I think she's asking, why didn't he play here? On that, you notice you got 3 attackers and only 2 defenders. So we can take either with the bishop or the queen here. Check. That forces a queen trade. And then we can take this with check. And that forks the king and the rook here. And we're lost. Same on bishop takes the bishop. So bishop d4 check was played. King g6. Rook c1 to help in the defense. So here we're not going to play, obviously, queen up here looking for a checkmate because we're the ones getting mated. Again, same thing. It's just different. Same thing. And he can actually obstruct our queen's path with h5. And even though we can take that en passant, what good did it do us? We can no longer access that square with our queen. We needed that pawn to defend our queen to come here. So rook c1 helps with the defense. Now bishop e5, and that's completely ignored. Rook h to f1, battery attacking this bishop right here on f5. After bishop takes d4, and you see that it's marked inaccurate. Bishop takes c2 is apparently more resistant, but wrong is wrong regardless. The point of this move, the bot is saying you might as well try this and hope for queen takes bishop. That would be a mistake for white. On queen takes bishop, this is what black would be hoping for with bishop takes c2. Obviously, the answer is king a1. I think it's a star. Wrong would be queen takes the bishop. And why? Because queen takes queen, and then rook takes queen, and then not rook takes rook, but bishop takes bishop. And all of a sudden, black has equalized. The mistake a lot of beginners make is they get focused on c2 and they just keep the trades going. Well, that would be a missed opportunity. Let me just say, we would take here. We would not take the rook. You don't want to take the rook or it's back to equal. You play bishop takes bishop, and it's a bishop and a knight against a rook, which should be winning. So you wouldn't want to take with the rook either, by the way, for the same reason. It's the same thing. It's just different. After queen takes c2, rook takes c2, and here bishop takes bishop. All right, so let's go back. What did he play? He played bishop takes bishop here on d4. Queen takes the bishop. Now bishop takes c2 check. And now king a1, and queen f6 is in the works here, isn't it? So f5 defends by discovery, en passant, and now queen g4 is being threatened, followed by checkmate. Queen d6 was played here. Rook g1 check, king f7, rook g7 check, king e8, queen e3 check. And here, black resigned the game. You'll note his only real move is king to d8. And then I'm simply going to play queen e7 check, force a queen trade, and I'm forking the king and the rook. And then see how this bishop is pinned? I'm going to win that as well. I'm going to take my imperiled rook and super attack the pinned bishop. Because what do you do to a pinned piece? You attack it again. Boom. And sure, he can move here and defend the rook. But the point is, I'm up a full rook at the end of everything, not to mention a pawn. And it's a passed pawn. So that is where and why he resigned. Let's run the numbers. Bobby Fischer scoring 91.1 accuracy with a single game rating of 2,800. Real nice game by Bobby.